Hi there, my name is Jacco. I'm the founder of Winning by Design. At Winning by Design, we specialize in recurring revenue operations. And today, under recurring revenue, we're going to talk about product-led growth. And oh my God, product-led growth, what an exciting and ongoing development. Now, as I take you through this, I want to make sure that you don't see me as trying to convince you of something. I'm not here to sell you why you should or shouldn't do it or why X or Y. All I'm trying to give you is a broader understanding of where it fits, so that at the end of the day, you can start tinkering around it yourself. Now, in order to explain it in more depth, I'm using models. And today I'm going to use 5 models, model 1 to 5, depicted down here. Now, why are models so important? Models are important because they give us an accurate description of how things work. It allows us to explain people, to start to visualize how they move, where they're from, and so on, and to see correlation between the left and the right. These are the things that models will help. Now, the human body has several models. If you think of the bone structure, it's a model of how the bones are put together, with every human being having the same amount of bones. If you overlay that with the muscle structure, we start to see how the bones and the muscles create emotion. And if we put on top of that the cardiovascular structure, we yet have another addition to that model. The more models we overlay on top of each other, the more accurate the operation of that particular system starts to become clear to us. So too are we going to overlay models on top of each other to understand the depth of product-led growth, why it works, why does it stop working at some point, how would we overcome that, and so on and so forth. Now, the first model I'm going to use is the business model. All of these models can be found on our YouTube site under youtube.com/winningbydesign, where each of these models is explained in detail. I'm only going to go over the highlights of it down here. What we see here is the different models that are taking place. On the left, I got ownership. On top, I got subscription, which is commonly SaaS. And on the right, I got consumption, which is for example, ad consumption vision. When I consume an ad and or I click on something, I enter my credit card information, then the supplier gets paid. On the left, that ownership is on-prem equipment, perpetual software, and so on and so forth. But what we're going to talk about sits right in that middle. It sits right there, that subscription business. And what we notice is that PLG primarily operates on 2 models today, monthly and annually, favoring monthly right now. I'm an advanced user of Superhuman, so every month I pay my fee to Superhuman. That allows me to process my email faster and so on, making me a very, very happy user. Now, what we see is that if we go from the left to the right, it impacts things. So for example, on the left, if you think about perpetual hardware, like the sales cycle, oh my gosh, 18 months. Think about that, 18 months, right? 6, 9, 12, 18 months. And if you go all the way to the right, we're going to see, in this part down here, oh my gosh, consumption-based model, what, click, seconds? Okay, that could be that fast. What we see is that when we look at product-led growth, it generally benefits on that monthly contract from very short sales cycles. That's the reason why it goes so fast. So that, it could be a less than a day, right? It could be you investigate it, less than a day. And that's the reason why you'll see it accelerates. Now, the reason why it accelerates, because if I look at the picture of risk, what I see is at this point in time down here, the buyer takes all the risk. This is the buyer's risk, right? The buyer's risk is super high down here. I need to get that equipment shipped. Even with SaaS, the buyer risk is relatively, it is not, it's not zero, because you still have to commit your company and your organization to training and whatnot. By the time we get to PLG, product-led growth, we often see that the risk is relatively low. It's an app you installed. It's like $29 a month. The risk is low. That low risk causes that fast sales cycle. This is the way on how you start to understand, hey, the further I go here. Now, if I would start selling a monthly or an annual contract, suddenly you're going to see, hey, I need to think about it, or I may to ask approval at the company if the company expenses, and I need budget for that. And as that happens, the risk starts to balance, it goes up, and you suddenly see that the sales cycle starts to increase. It suddenly starts to go from like 1 day, and you may need a week or something like that, or an approval cycle, right? So that's what you'll see as how that starts to manipulate. Now, that's the first model. And what I want you to understand is where you go on this model, it's going to impact your sales cycle and it's going to impact the risk picture, right? The risk is less. Now, as I go to the second model, I'm going to talk about what the data model does. How does this, what does the data model do down here? Now, for this data model, I'm using the bow tie on the left and all the 3 stages of black. That's what we typically call the marketing and sales funnel. And on the right is where recurring revenue takes place. Now, recurring revenue operates off a different growth principle than historic models. In order to achieve recurring revenue and in order to achieve growth, you have to deliver the customer first impact. Growth cannot be on just winning more customers. That's not by itself complete enough. Why? Because you can win all day long more customers, but you got to renew them every month after month after month. And that only takes place if you deliver the impact that the customer wants. The first principle of recurring revenue in SaaS, in PLG models, and so on is, are you delivering the recurring impact? Therefore, recurring impact delivers recurring revenue. That's the key principle I want you to use. No recurring impact, no recurring revenue. What we see here is that PLG impacts the LTV to CAC ratio in this picture. On the left, the marketing and sales funnel covers the client acquisition cost. On the right, the cost to serve. In the middle, down here, is right where actually the client created the commit. And I call this mutual commit. I don't call this close. Let's call this mutual commit. Why? Because both parties, in this case, agree to commit to something. Both parties are applying resources and whatnot. So right in the middle here is a mutual commit. Now, what most of the successful recurring revenue businesses work off is what they call the LTV to CAC ratio of 3-to-1. That means that I gotta make 3 times as much on the lifetime value of the client than the cost that it took to acquire that client. So if it took me $1,000 to acquire that client, I better be making more than $3,000 total because I still gotta pay the cost to serve and whatnot. Now, that 3-to-1 ratio has a side impact. What we notice that historically, conventional SaaS companies have an approximate client acquisition cost to recoup, time to recoup of 21 months. It will take them 21 months of recurring revenue, delivering impact, recurring revenue, delivering impact, recurring revenue, to recoup what they spent on simply getting the client to the mutual commit. In order, therefore, for us to have a healthy client following the 3-to-1 ratio, it means that the client needs to be with us for 21 months times 3, 63 months, which is in excess of 5 years. This is the Achilles heel of SaaS companies. We think, hey, all these models work really great, and they do, but it's 5 years, people. And if we have focused all our resources on acquisition and bringing on great sales teams and expensive marketing campaigns, and we spend nothing on a customer success organization, or at least out of balance, we're not going to hit 63. Therefore, our LTV to CAC ratio is going to drop. And as a result, what we call it's not sustainable. And you cannot scale that what you cannot sustain. It's not scalable. We're not making enough money to pay for everything else in the company. Of course, there's always exceptions and companies that keep, receiving funds and this and that. I get that. That's good too. All we're saying is we need to look at it mathematically. 63 months is an awfully long time, and most organizations are not aware of that length. Now, how does product-led growth impact this, Jacco? That's what I'm here for. I'm here for product-led growth. Guess what? Well, what happens in product-led growth is I still want that 3-to-1 ratio. I still need that. I still need to make 3 times as much money as I get from you. So in case of Superhuman, let's say I pay $30 per month, they need to make $100 to $120 on me before they would consider me a successful client. That means that the client acquisition costs, since they are so determinant in this factor, I need to take a close look at that. And guess what? With product-led growth, folks, you are the cost. It is you who is marketing and sales. It is you who start going around there. You are the marketing and sales organization, right? And so that suddenly drops a significant amount of the need that they need to make profit. We no longer talk about like, oh my gosh, it took me 20 months to get, like my CAC back. No, you're the cost. You're $0. You pay them. right? Beautiful. This is magnificent. Let's say that the marketing cost, divided about all the marketing, online, SEO. Let's add all that up, divided by 20s or thousands and thousands of users, and they come to the conclusion that in PLG your CAC is or your client acquisition cost is approximately, and the recoup is 3-to-1. 1 month is the cost, 3-to-1. Like the recoup is 3 months. All they need to get you to is renew 2 months, 1 month, second month, third month. Boom! We're in this money zone. Wonderful. Really good. This really helps. This understanding that CAC to LTV here impacts this is wonderful. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the second model and say like, well, what powers this engine? Where does this come from? Well, it comes from the mathematical nature that sits behind the scenes. So let me explain. What we see historically, we think historically that if you look here at the conventional marketing and sales funnel, it's one direction and so on and so forth. But what we see happen is that with product-led growth, growth takes place when happy customers, aka you and I, are starting to talk about other happy customers and use social media to scale that. With that, we see that there's something happening on that back end. Not only do I need twice as many leads, potentially leading to twice as many deals. Heck no. Any customer starts to generate their own new customers. Now, in particular, what happens on the back, what that is referred to as a closed loop or a growth loop. Existing customers start bringing on new customers, start growing. And as we see that growth occur, we start to notice certain trends. Now, growth, when I bring on 2 additional folks and those people all keep adding 2 additional folks themselves, then it starts to compound. We see that the growth starts to become exponential, and the more people we get, the more people we start growing. And it starts to grow faster and faster. What we see here is that PLG takes place in a different mathematical domain. In particularly, when those clients start to increase usage and pay for usage, it starts to compound. The opposite is also true. If I start to lose customers or they start spending less money on me, that also compounds, but with a negative impact. This compound nature is the fundamental reasons why product-led growth based on an exponential growth curve really go through this. It is based on the fundamental understanding of exponential. And let me explain to you what I mean with exponential. For those of you, who have not seen this in a while, what you see what exponential does, if I keep extending my contract, in this case annually, I go from 3 years to 4 years to 5 years. I have the same delta, right? I move from 3 to 4 years, that's an extension of 1 year. I move from 4 to 5 years, an extension by 1 month. But according to this exponential growth curve, once it's exponential, it creates disproportionate impact. That means that the extension from year 2 to 3 can deliver a higher profit than the extension from year 1 to 2. This is the reason why this comes from, is that there's a client acquisition cost and the cost to serve a customer are different. And often the client acquisition cost is a fraction higher than the cost it is to serve a customer. So if every month that the after acquisition that the client keeps renewing, that cost is significantly lower, creating that disproportionate amount of profit. This is the key to things to understand. I'm creating disproportionate amount of profit. Now, what PLG is not yet today in most models benefiting from is if they're creating upsells. So for example, if I would have, in case of my superhuman, I would keep renewing, but every month I would spend a little bit more because they offer a new feature or something new or something like I really need, and I want that, then I start increasing my spend on it. That's when immense profit machines takes place. Product-led growth today does not yet expand on that. Compare that, for example, in B2C to modern gaming, where they give the game away for free, but where you start to consume skins and ads, and they have all kinds of ways to start selling to you. That spend is high, and as the relationship between you and that vendor go on, more and more spend generates more and more profit. It compounds. Product-led growth does not have that benefit in most cases yet. But I rest assured that within a few years, we're going to see the monthly subscriptions drop, but the consumption of it increase, because that's where an ultimate growth engine lies. In product-led growth, because of my low CAC, as I said earlier, I'm going to see that no longer at the annual increases, I see that on the monthly increases. I already see that impact occur. This is because of the disproportionate nature that exponential have, and that exponential, where it comes from, is that every single user starts adding up 2 to 3 to 4 users. And if you keep doing that, you're going to get an exponential growth curve of users. That has an impact on the go-to-market model. Now, on the go-to-market model, we're going to see where we're going to run into some issues. All so far is great. I mean, like, I'm growing product-led growth. It comes at lower cost. It grows faster. I mean, like, oh my gosh, this is all good, right? But once we start to see it in context of other B2B based go-to-market models, we start to see that. And by the way, 3-letter acronyms, oh my gosh, is our industry, is that like, I mean, it must be the industry of the most 3-letter acronyms, right? So PLG, product-led growth, GTM, go-to-market. Now, what we see here is where product-led growth sits. It sits historically at the low end of the dollar spent annually that a customer would spend on a company, and at the high, it needs therefore high volume. On the opposite side, we see down here, all the way on the right, we see that most companies need, like if you're selling, let's say $500,000 solutions, a company is not just going to go online, enter the credit card and say, thank you very much. They need help. And so what you'll see at the lower spectrum, of the lower dollar value, I'm sitting in front of it. Down here, you're going to see lower volume, but higher dollar value. And product-led growth all the way over there, super high volume, but low dollar value. And obviously, when you draw a line in between, you see the different go-to-market models. Now, the different colors depict different things. The boxes in black are the marketing go-to-market models. The boxes with the fuchsia color around it are the sales motions. And those in blue are the customer success motions, right? And so in product-led growth, we typically see very much based on inbound, using community to solve the problems, and the founder. The founder plays a big role inside customer-led growth, product-led growth companies. And, like the go-to-market model here is referred to as product-led growth. Now, what I see is that it maps very well to what we see today is a pro user. A pro user, I'm an advanced user of OBS and Adobe and solutions like that. I'm a pro user. I'm willing to spend money on that. And when pro users spend money, they can easily spend a couple of $1,000s a year on that because they're a professional user. It's part of themselves making money. That's where that sits. Pro users in B2B originally are product-led growth in B2B really originate with a pro user audience. Keep that in mind. The professional user. Where it starts to run into it in problems is when we start moving this to SMB. And in the growth model where I'm going to go next, we're going to see is like at some point we want to grow. All companies, all PLG companies, even the most renowned ones that you heard, even the ones that are based in Australia or in Silicon Valley or wherever they're at, all of them run into this wall sooner or later. And I'm going to explain to you why that is. Once we start to see what really sits behind it, is we start to understand that becoming a product-led growth company and becoming an SMB company or even an enterprise company is not all that easy. So where does that pain come from? Where does that pain originate? In order to understand that, I'm going to take a look at what sits behind product-led growth. What engine powers product-led growth? Now, I simplify this. I mean, like, hallelujah, it is, it's driven by product. Oh my gosh, Jacco, what an insight. Product-led growth is delivered by product. Yes, it's powered by product. That product powers reputation. Super important. That product in itself cannot do it. You can have a great product, but if there's not a reputation behind it, I said earlier, this is where the founder gets involved. Often on Twitter, in these early days, you saw it with Eric Yuan at Zoom, you see it with several people that when they early on, you can literally send a message or you'll blab something on Twitter and you get a response. They may even code it to solve a solution over the weekend. This builds reputation. This is like, oh my gosh. And it builds great users. Now, often what drives great product, it sits on like really simple and sexy UI UX. Like, oh my gosh, this makes it so much simpler, so much easier, so easy on the eye. Design, it's like, that drives this engine of product, reputation, and users. At the core of it, the reason why companies buy it or why you as a pro user buy it is because it helps you make money. But this product makes it so much easier than the competing product. If we now look at the SMB engine, what sits in the mid-market, it's a very different engine. Product still needs to be great, but often that is built on insights, and insights that are delivered through content. Why? Because you no longer are convincing one person, you need to convince several individual users. It needs consensus. And in order to create, make sure that we get consensus, I need to start educating. And for education, I start to use content because it's is a way of how I relay my insights. Events are super important. For example, the Gainsight Pulse conference and so on and so forth. These conferences really are creating a thought leadership. This is based on your insights. In this case, product can be great, but in some cases, the product becomes secondary. It's the thought leadership really that takes place. HubSpot set a phenomenal example here with inbound marketing. And nowadays we'll see a number of companies set a phenomenal stage for yet another segment. That segment is what I call the trust-based segment. This is where we trust brand and people. When you're buying at $500,000 price and the risk is high because you're spending the company's $500,000 money, you don't want to be fired and see yourself and the future of your family's, your financial risk there is huge, so you don't want that. And so what we see, companies when they buy brand, like nobody got ever fired for IBM is one of those things, right? You buy into the people, the sales professional that you work with, the solutions architect that is involved in there. You start to trust them because you feel like, hey, you're selling it to me right now, but will you be there during the installation? Hence the role of the solution architect being so important in this. What I want to make sure is that in many societies, we no longer value the history of a relationship and the death. So my uncle's nephew's brother used to work with you is no longer a valid reason to buy your product, right? And so it's expertise-based relationship. Can I trust that person on the basis of their expertise? There are certain cultures where the trust still is built on the name. We see in Brazil, for example, who you are and where you're from. We see several countries in APAC where it's super important and for good reason. I don't want you to think that this is like a bribe or something like that. No, people trust people. These three models that I depict down here are three very different models. This explains why to move from one model to another model is a DNA change for most companies. You cannot just go from a product-led growth and suddenly move to content and insights and thought leadership. It's a different segment. You're selling to an individual pro user, and here in SMB, you're selling to a different market segment, a group of decision makers. You may need features such as single sign-on, security is ramped up, all things start to change down here. Once you go to enterprise, oh my gosh, you need templates, you need services, 24/7 support, dedicated account managers, and so on and so forth. What you'll see on the left, product-led growth, which essentially is not led by product. It is led by customers who are promoting the product because we are still doing it ourselves. We, the humans, are passing the word along. Content-led growth. Again, it's we, the humans, who pass the knowledge on. Or at the end, brand-led growth, which essentially ends up customer-led growth. Customers start word of mouth. All these three have in common that they generate and propagate through a human being in different forms. One is through talking about the product, the other is by thought leadership, and the third one is the leveraging of brand and expertise-driven insights. These are the three engines. And these engines and the walls between them are indicative of the challenge we are going to run into with product-led growth. Let me explain that. What we see that in today's picture is that product-led growth is moving slightly upstream. Product-led growth is going from like the no touch to more and more to low touch, online chat supported and so on. And as it grows and as it moves onward, it starts to put pressure on inside sales rep organizations, people who are trying to sell you, set up a demo and so on. Look, automated demo online, want to try it out, try it 1 month, no demo needed, just go try out the product, enter your credit card information, and so on and so forth. That is all no touch. There may be some low touch that says, password and loss of password support online, quick templates and stuff like that. That's referred to as no touch and low touch. This area of product-led growth can be seen throughout. Wes Bush and his team are really focused on that area down here, right? And so this is a problem that starts to occur now, is the moment in time when I go and I cross that barrier. Because once I cross that barrier, suddenly the machine stops working. Now, in order to understand what happens is, most of these product-led growth companies, they start to sell, like 1 license, 2 license, whether it's superhuman or and so on and so forth. And they start selling multiple licenses into a company. If you are noticing that in the data, you can now approach that particular SMB or that particular company or group or division inside a company and say, hey, I noticed that you're consuming X amount of licenses. Wouldn't it make sense for you to buy a total license? And so companies that are growing into that segment say, yes, absolutely. But then they go into a longer sales cycle and the decision process gets longer. I automatically start to move to a yearly and annual agreement. Remember what happened? Risk goes up. Suddenly the company wants to buy consensus and things starts to slow down. The machine starts to come to a halt. You may not have the features. You're suddenly competing with another group of competitors. You're no longer at $29 a month. Look, you don't need a lot of priority to make that decision. But as you become a platform and you start to charge $24,000 for 30 users, you have to compete not only with your own competitors, you suddenly are starting to become like one of the 50 products we need to buy this month. Is this the product we need? It starts to become a priority issue. Not because the money, simply because we have no time to onboard all this. Is this what we need? You start to run into issues. These issues start to originate and become really clear when we look at the growth model. Now, what we noticed on the growth model is that historically, in the growth model, on the left here, we put revenue. And that revenue could be like 1 million. If I would make that complete and I do it in 10,000, that will be 10 million, and this would be 100 million. But today, if I change that to seats, it starts to become more clear what this is. If I change this to seats, what we're starting to see, that in order to achieve from prototype, let me go out of the picture. If I go from prototype to minimal viable product, and from minimal viable product, if I go to product market fit, and from product market fit to go-to-market fit and so on, we can now map the amount of seats that are involved with, the amount of users that we are looking at. If I look at that and map that here, 1,000 users, 20,000 users, 100,000 users, then we see that about 1,000 users, it starts to become a product market fit. And about 20,000 users, you start to achieve some go-to-market fit. Now, for some of you, this may be 100,000 users. For some of you, this may be 10,000 users. I mean, I'm just trying to depict the point. There is some break point where you say, I now learned how to sell the product. I know how to reach my audience. I have marketing and sales campaigns that can scale accordingly. Once you do that, you start to enter the scale-up mode. This is where you are able to start scaling your users up. And your users are now, you spend twice as much on marketing spend, and you see approximately twice as many users come in. And you go to yourself, hey, that's cool. That's scalable. But then, and you know where I'm headed. Do you think this scales indefinitely? Of course not. Of course not. At some point in time, it becomes unscalable. That means at that point where you start and your client acquisition costs start to increase and your cost to serve start to increase, right after 20, for most companies with product-led growth, right after 20,000 users-ish, and that can for some again be 50,000 users, okay, it suddenly becomes unscalable. This thing starts to go to that thing. No longer can we scale that, right? It becomes unscalable. And if it's unscalable, we cannot sustain it. That means that the client acquisition cost in order to acquire the client is starting to spin out of control. Why is that at 20,000? Remember I said earlier, this was the enthusiastic user. This was the pro user. These are the people that are the enthusiasts. Well, in generally, that starts to run out. There's not an unlimited amount of enthusiasts. And at some point, you are running out of those enthusiasts. And they become average customers that have average pains, that don't know how to log in their password, that has 99% of all the issues, that are going to draw all the resources that you need. And as you are growing and your corporate structure requires you to grow faster and faster and faster, you need to spend more money on campaign in order to win more of the right clients. But because you're spending more money, you're not getting more of the right clients. So now you get the wrong clients. But all these wrong clients are going to need a little bit of help. They're not the right kinds. They're going to complain. They need customer support. You cannot have a wildfire on social media. So you now deploy a social media team to make sure that stays in tune. And all that things suddenly, it starts to kind of like run into challenges. And you start to freak out. And that's okay. And that's okay. And so often what you can now see is, what if I start moving from a monthly contract to an annual contract? Oh my gosh. If I move from monthly to annual, from monthly to annual, I slower my sales cycle, right? I go slower, but the churn starts to go down. We know that. And suddenly the solution starts to stabilize. So this is, for example, an idea where you can go back like, I now go back to this model and I'm going to run a different model instead of like where I was here. I now suddenly go to the left. And as I go to the left, my metrics down here change, my picture down here change. And so it starts to impact all these other models, but it stabilizes, but it goes slower. This problem where you fit and the problem that occurs between all these users from all these different stages essentially comes down to the moment in time that you hit this moment. At this particular moment, the picture down here, and I'm going to make it a little bit fatter and I make it a little bit more pronounced, that line is the moment you come to the conclusion, I'm going to go into SMB, or I'm going to sell into teams rather than into pro users. Now, SMB, VSB, enterprise, all I'm trying to say is suddenly you're no longer selling to a single decision maker, but you're selling to a group of decision makers. No longer can you just provide them with Google sign-on. They suddenly need integration with CRM and ERP and all that. When you do that, your client acquisition costs are going up and your cost to serve are both going up. As you now start to deploy this new go-to-market strategy, you have to establish, what is my new minimal viable product? What is my new thing down here? Because I may need new requirements. I may need new product features in there. And as you go, your price may be different. You're now priced against different competitors. So you need to establish that. And you need to establish, is product market fit, a product-led growth, is that still the right model? And no, it isn't. I need a sales team. I need people to actually start pushing product and start helping. That is that barrier. What we now see, that barrier that I put down here, that I'll make it a little, I'll give it the red line. So that red line that I'm creating down here, that is suddenly where it no longer works as advertised. And you start to feel you're forcing it. And suddenly companies need to switch. And like I said at the start of this, as we come to an end here, almost every company, and we've worked with companies that we can under NDA not mention to you, because you think these are the companies that are in public saying, I don't need a sales force, I don't need X, Y, Z. Of course they do. At a certain point in time they do. They will hit that barrier. They will hit that wall. And it's purely and primarily because these engines operate differently. These markets operate differently. And as you move through these markets, you need to have different go-to-market models like I depicted down here. Now, don't get me wrong. This model is growing upstream. It is going that direction. And what we see that the use of this model is shrinking. Shrinking means I need to drag it, yes. Is shrinking. And we also see that two-stage SDRs, AEs organizations are becoming more and more of a specialized tool. And as they become more and more specialized, that product-led growth is slowly pushing that. At the same time, we see that at the high end, we see that customer-led growth is really becoming a trend. It uses the exact same engine as product-led growth, in which your customers are providing word of mouth. And these engines start to walk in from that end. These particular engines and the pressure we're on, I like to tell you, oh my gosh, this is such an exciting. Why is this? Because it is so exciting, because it involves the customer as part of marketing and sales. And if the customer is part of marketing and sales, it means that we're going to treat the customer really well. And if you treat the customer really well, we're in my domain. I love customers. I don't want to sell and arm wrestle. I'd rather have them a great experience and let them bring on great new customers. This is the role that product-led growth is. This is the role that product-led growth is gonna play in the days and years to come. Let me summarize. What we see today is that architecture is based, and as we provide proper revenue architecture, we do it based on growth models. And there's 5 models that we are described here today. One is the business model. What is the impact of going from an annual to a monthly contract? It shifts the risk more toward or less to the buyer. And as the risk shifts, sales cycles shorten up and win rate goes up. As we see, as that shifts risk, then we go to the next step, data model. What we really see in the data model, once we learn the data, is that the LTV to CAC ratio is very positively influenced in product-led growth because the client acquisition cost is you and therefore nearly zero. There are costs, the marketing costs, the promotion costs, SEO, website, all these campaigns that they run, but the cost of the sales organization is being reduced by a large extent. And so the data model being 3-to-1 on CAC to LTV suddenly start to become very low. And so in PLG, we don't need companies or people to stay 5 years with us. I mean, if they stay 1 year with us, there's most likely already return. You see in PLG often 5, 6, 7 months starts to become really profitable for that company. Now, why that is because they sit on the right side of that bow tie that I depicted, and they leverage the exponential growth curve. Exponential creates a disproportionate impact. What we see today still is that most PLGs, and I do not know of any, so if you know of any, please put it in the comments of this video, but they lack upsell. What if you could have PLG with upsell? Oh my gosh, I could see that the future of that is huge if you have the right product for that. Why? Because it starts to spin off a disproportionate amount of profit with every month that the contract goes on. Today, it does so because the client acquisition cost and the cost to serve primarily are you, and therefore the cost becomes less and less and less the more and the longer you are a customer. And as a result, in the beginning, that $30 a month had to pay for the campaign, but once you're already using that product, they don't need to spend the marketing campaign dollars on you any longer. Finally, our fourth model, GoToMarket Model, we see that within product-led growth is really well low volume and gets the machine going really quickly, but it runs into the wall at some point in time, often between 20 and 100,000 users, where it runs into a wall where it says, the users I'm getting are no longer enthusiasts. Suddenly they become the same, like consumer users that have pains and problems, and therefore you need to start building your infrastructure to support those clients. And as you build that infrastructure, you suddenly start to see the cost going up. And as the cost going up, it becomes less profitable. And it happens at the same time that you need to grow really, really rapidly. And as you come to that conclusion, you go like, oh, I'd rather go win an enterprise and win 8,000 clients all at once. 8,000 subscribers, 8,000 seats, 8,000 users all at once. And so you start to focus on that SMB mid-market enterprise. But once you go in there, you realize that there's 3 engines. The engine that you designed your company around no longer works the same that it works in SMB and enterprise. Exceptions are always there. Exceptions are always there. But for most companies, that doesn't happen. And that comes because at that point in time that you start to grow, the demands for growth keep growing if you're venture funded. I mean, like, it's great that you got 10,000 users, but we invested in you to make it to 1 million users, right? So the pressure for growth is on, the cost of growth goes up. And so as you now enter that new market, you have to realize that entering the SMB market requires that you reestablish minimal viable product, that you reestablish, product market fit, price, and so on, that you reestablish go-to-market fit. How am I going to sell this? Am I going to bring on a sales team or not? And once you do that, it's going to take you, anywhere from 12 to 18 months. You start to flow through and you start to recreate that growth. These are the 5 models that I want you to see. And I want you to understand, once you have moved back to that SMB, you have to go back to all these models and you recycle through all of them and establish that. That's the use of models. That's the stuff that I'm excited about. I hope that it has been of help to you and that it allows you to think about product-led growth. There's a little bit more to it, when to apply it, when it runs into the ground, and how you're going to be able to lift it out, and so on and so forth. All that. If you want to learn more, go to the website. We have a website called thescienceofrevenue.com. This is a spin-off of what we're doing at Winning by Design. At this website, we provide all our insights free of charge to you, to help you educate, to help you see what we see, to share all the findings in an open domain. All this is open source. So I hope that you enjoy that. Go there, sign up. When you sign up, you can get to continue to get notifications when I launch videos like this. With that said, thank you for spending time with me. Have a wonderful, wonderful time. And I'm looking forward to see you out there.